So I figured start this one. This is a new one for me. And if you notice my old presentation, one of the first things are computers. They don't like you. They don't like people, because I tried to convert the other one to this new format and it just did not like me. It decided to blow up on me. So anyways, I'm Greg Goll, Medical Imaging Services, WellStar Health System, Marietta, Georgia. And for those of you, most of you have seen me before, so I won't go into too much, but we're 13 hospitals, probably right now the biggest healthcare provider in Georgia, give or take, if Piedmont didn't take me over, as I said earlier. But history of how did I get into this IT stuff? So years and years ago, a bunch of us biomeds, actually about 1993, we came up with a special degree program because all of us had biomed degrees. And we talked to a college called Eastern Michigan University out of Ypsilanti, Michigan, after we tried to market ourselves into saying, we'd like to get a 2+2 program. And basically we wanted to do it something in computers. So that's how I got started in this. There were about 38 of us that started that program in 1993. And unfortunately, only 6 of us survived. So I'm the little engine that could, I make the joke. I was number 6. So anyways, that was the start of all this stuff. So one of the things that was, I thought, really interesting, when we're talking about cybersecurity, that's an interesting thing. When I started this presentation, there's a couple new programs we're dealing with at work that I was hoping to get into this. About 3 hours after I hit the send button on this, then I got into everything. Now, one of the things that, believe it or not, is, I couldn't believe it, but my IT division, I've been basically in the cybersecurity groups for years and years and years. So we got a new software, and our director of cybersecurity was sending me, I'm sending you an invite to our new program. That was great. So he kept, every week when we have our meetings, why haven't you logged in? I said, logged into what? And then finally, right Monday, last Monday, we're on the meeting. I said, look, there's nothing from this company. It's called Clarity. And so it turns out that when he was emailing me, he took, if you notice here, my first name's Gregory. He was emailing greg.goll@wellstar.org. So my head of cybersecurity, my whole cybersecurity group was using the wrong email to get me onto my program. And they were going like, hey, why is our problem child not working? And it's like, I'm not the problem child. You guys are. So this is something I mentioned before. How many people, speak geek? And the main thing is, everybody you're talking to, make sure they can understand what you're talking about. I had, not picking on one of my technicians, I have had I've been fortunate in my career, I've worked with several really brilliant engineers, but they're so good at what they did, you really didn't want to leave them out on the floor. Because when they talk to people, they would go like, here's what I did to remediate a problem down to the IC level. And you would watch, it didn't matter what staff member it was, their eyes would glaze over. About the first 30 seconds, they're gone. So, easiest way for technical, confused technical staff, clinical staff, assuming they understand IT technology, terminology. So, know who you're talking to, and that's the biggest thing. Part of my history of IT is when back in my first life, we were in direct competition with a group called MIT. It was Michigan IT, and kind of one of the jokes was back in the day, they were a bunch of biomeds who became IT, and they turned back on us and said, there's more of us certified than you guys are. And so it became a competition between our group and their group, who we actually we managed to do the first online certification where 6 of us became certified at one time, just to pass them up and say, yeah, guys, we're here. So anyways, take time to know your audience. So basic terminology. If you guys, how many of you are have no experience on the tech side? Okay, a little bit. So anyways, basic terminology. And why I put this stuff in is when the slideshow goes home, feel free to share it. with anybody. So operating systems, you all know what those are: Windows, applications, software packs, network, wireless versus hardwired. And where this keeps metamorphosizing is I've had a lot of discussions with my vendors in here about as equipment keeps metamorphosizing, especially like the operating systems. It's not only the software it's the problem, it's the actual physical box that these come into, because you'll hear some of the people saying, how do I protect against my Windows XP system going out of date? Some people, like in my past life, we did things like evergreen contracts, things like that, where we'd keep our technology current. Because otherwise, you just, plain and simple, had a telemetry system at one point, and you could not buy this motherboard to support it from the company. But fortunately, we knew you could buy them from Newegg Software. And I had a corporate Visa card. So guess who got all of them before they got sold out? This kid. So cybersecurity refers to every aspect of protecting your organization, its employees, and devices against cyber threats. Devices become more complex, the threats become more common and more difficult to remediate. Now I've got a question for you. In the imaging world, what is the most defenseless device you think that you'd never worry about that would be a problem? Just pick one. MRI? Because on what I was saying, when I sent that presentation to Kristen, within 3 hours, all hell broke loose from one device that was a problem child. And you'll never believe what it was. The most harmless thing that sits in every MRI room, every CT room, every IR room. No, those are a problem, but I can't fix those. A contrast injector. So what we had happen is, for some reason, unbeknownst, we still don't know why. All of a sudden, we had a cybersecurity alert come out that one of our contrast injectors was throwing out 2 gigabyte just flashes of data to nowhere. And what happened was it immediately started, because we have network surveillance, our IT division, cybersecurity came up to us and said, what's going on? And so that was one of the unfortunate things. I couldn't get the screen captures to put on here. But when you're looking at some of these devices, MRI is business critical. You wouldn't think that a harmless injector hanging from the ceiling would be a problem child. In this case, what we're doing right now, as far as I know, this morning, last week I spent 15 hours on calls over this injector, because we did determine that it wasn't somebody coming for it, or it was trying to go somewhere. It was just randomly bursting data out. And the volume of 2 gigabytes is pretty big. So it set off a bunch of network alarms. So right now we're actually to the point of when we swap out, it should have swapped out this morning, the CPU's going out to Germany. It's going to figure out what's going on. So when you're thinking about this stuff, it's not the things that you're really thinking about that would cause you problems like the big iron. I never envisioned an injector would be a problem. Same with years ago. Do you guys remember when they managed to breach the PCAs, patient-controlled analgesia machines? They had a person who went out, bought a PCA used, sat at home, and basically spent all their time on the wireless, trying to figure out from here to here how to breach this thing. And that's all he did. And eventually he did. And it caused a massive recall. I believe it was Abbott, back probably thinking 12 years ago. But that's, some of the worries you have is, in a normal world, you wouldn't think about but what does a PCA do? It delivers morphine. Overdose on morphine, what will it do? It will kill you. And so somehow, in fact, we had a whole thread going around our profession going like, who would do something like this? Just sit there at their laptop, just trying to breach this thing over. But the catch was, they did that. And so when you're thinking about this stuff, Evolutions of threats. So I don't know if any of you guys have seen this before. I'm putting this stuff together. You know, back in the old days, you worried about your standalone computer, Gen 1 viruses. Network. As networks became more sophisticated, attacks over the internet result in the development of a firewall, application through vulnerabilities within an application, intrusion prevention systems, Walmart, Gen 4 payload, Mega Gen 5, so a lot of this really has come into play. And I'll tell you the things you can do. I don't have them in this slides because I didn't want to make this like, you guys want to get tequila tonight, right? Because I made the joke with Chris, and I said, if I had taken the stuff that happened this week and put it in here, you guys wouldn't be drinking tequila tonight. We'd be here for 6 hours. I probably wouldn't have a voice, but so anyways, the catches with this is where a lot of viruses come is, in fact, I don't have one, I didn't pull one out, but everyone remember the cute little RAM sticks we're getting in the show down here? Who is the most common person that walks around to your devices with a RAM stick getting patient data? A physician. And one of the issues I had in a past life is our cath lab, a doctor was using the same RAM stick over and over and over again. And we happened to get an alert that all of a sudden our workstation in our cath lab area, our first workstation, was somehow had a virus in it. The virus propagated, was starting to move. Fortunately, they called us quick enough, so we ran down, we just unplugged it, took it off the network. But lo and behold, that did spawn something in my old life that what we did was everybody who was in IT or had a need for a RAM stick, we had a device called an iron key, and it was all assigned to us. So what happened was that memory stick was, if something happened to it, it was encrypted, it was yours, the serial number, everything came back to you. So that was one of the things that, another thing, how many people have seen these plugged into anything? You're smiling. I used to be, they used to call us J-Rats because I was part of a group that go around the hospital looking for compliance and things like that. It is absolutely amazing. Despite you telling people, these will be plugged into your PC for your CT, your PC for your MRI, your central stations for your patient monitoring. And the biggest thing is set in, the worst thing that is it's not on the slide, but it's a BYOD. You guys know what that is? Bring your own device. So it's metamorphosized over the years. Employers expect you to have a cell phone. Normally I have two, I just decided to keep them. I don't like my Apple, so I just left it to be in timeout on my car. So my Android stays with me all the time. I'm just kidding. So anyways, back on that evolution and protection. And an interesting one last night, I'm flipping up this ransomware. One of the things I always do before I leave is I power up. I have two laptops with me all the time. One's my hospital laptop, one is my laptop. I call it my little pirate. So what happened was the last thing I do before I leave, I always power up my hospital laptop, make sure there's no software updates, there's no antivirus updates, and had the most important project last night, paying my employees. So I went, you know what? Piece of cake, finished swimming, fire up my laptop, one and done. All of a sudden on the bottom of my screen comes Palo Alto Clarity. And I was like, you cannot access this network because it's insecure. So for the next 45 minutes, I was on the phone to Marietta going, hey guys, what gives? Well, your network's not safe here, that nobody should be on the hotel. And I said, why don't you understand, there's a bunch of imaging professionals here that their computers work and this one doesn't. So we finally weeded out what was going on with mine. But just to tell you, even when something, like if it had been something critical where I needed to access, I was 45 minutes working with IT to get my computer to work right. So ransomware, everybody knows about this. We've had a few issues. you're familiar, Gwinnett County down around Atlanta had this, one of their hospitals. Evolution, basically what ransomware does, do you guys know what it is? So I don't have to go into it. Basically somebody steals your files, locks them down, and until you pay the money, they don't give them back to you. And what happens if you don't pay the money? They destroy your data. And if you consider, how much, just if you just have a simple hiccup in a database to manually re-enter a day's worth of scheduling for imaging, you're talking hundreds of dollars of loss of revenue for people. So distributed denial of service, attacks incentivize victims to meet the ransom demands. Some of the things that recently that I can think of, my old hospital, McLaren Health System, they had a breach I read about on the news where they basically lost, I can't remember if it was their lab, but one component of their whole network across 13 hospitals completely went down for days. And they had to do a complete rebuild. University of Michigan, which is where I originally worked, their main campus lost all their guest Wi-Fi. All their Wi-Fi for all their students completely went down for about a week. And you can imagine what kind of havoc that causes for a college. Phishing. Now this is something that my IT division loves doing to us. Do any of you guys get phished by your own employer? Y'all do good. How many have fallen for it? Yeah. I worked at one point for IT at WellStar, and they used to give out stuff all the time, and they'd send emails and say, you reply back, you get a WellStar jacket, you get, let us know, and you go to the administration floor to pick it up. Well, lo and behold, I was busy doing some other stuff. I was getting ready to do an RFP for a database. I wasn't paying attention. I read this and I was like, oh, great, they're giving us another shirt or jacket or whatever. And lo and behold, I got phished by my own people. And actually, I think I've gotten it 3 times because they have this habit of doing it. I tell the vendors downstairs, I said, do not email me on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, because I may be looking at your email and I may just be waving at it as it goes down the screen, never to be seen again. Friday, nobody wants to work. I hate to say it, but my volume of emails goes down to about 20 from about 150. So anyways, something you need to watch. I had one funny one that just in here, I got an email about my toll on the Orlando Turnpike. No sooner did I enter here, I was like, God, these guys are good. And then one of the people that's here said, no, do not, because when I read it originally, I was like, how do you do this Florida Turnpike thing? Because the last time I came here, I had a rental truck and it had the Florida Pass on it. So I didn't pay any attention, drove in, drove out, got a email from my rental car company, said, we paid your toll, no big deal. So not thinking anything about it, I'm waiting for something in the mail to come back. Also, I was getting ready to gripe to them because I got on the Florida Turnpike and 10 miles down the road, there was a major accident and I had to go an hour on the way to get back on the Turnpike again. I said, you're charging me full price. I should be charging you guys. So, it's something, but it's something that if somebody here hadn't told me, do not reply to that. And also, how many people have their package misdelivered on their email? So I have that all the time. But again, understanding the connected device environment. Understand. So one of the weaknesses we have, and you guys can correct me, maybe you're a lot better than us, but when I started my job in medical imaging, we had well, let me go back to prior life. What we did was we set up our own network for patient monitoring when I was a biomed, and we managed to, we did a major forklift of a, trying to think, 200-bed telemetry system. What happened was we had a bunch of money left over. IT came to us and said, there's a product called SolarWinds we want to buy. Anybody heard of SolarWinds at all? Unfortunately, years later, they were the guys out of Austin, Texas that got breached. And they had a major cybersecurity issue. But back in the day, what we managed to do was outside of my technicians were really upset because we allocated $150,000 for them to buy this program. And I said, guys, don't be upset. I said, what's going to happen is they want this for them. When they get to us, they want nothing to do with us. Trust me. I said, just go to these meetings, sit and listen to them. And I said, within 2 or 3 weeks, when it turns back around, that they have to watch our equipment, they're going to throw it to us like a hot potato. And they did. And at that point, we managed to, what we did was we built a whole network of every patient monitor that we had. All of our equipment that was in our world was on the SolarWinds program. So we could literally do is, if we heard something from an ICU that said, you know, one of my beds is acting strange, we had a basically a central area where you could go up, pull up the map of SolarWinds, and you could take a look at that monitor and see exactly what's going on. Now, one of the things to get into this world where I managed to get into it was I had one guy who was going to college, and he was a biomed, and he got every certification that everybody in IT had. So he had Microsoft Security, so when they were kind of going like, first they were letting me into the world a little more because like, you know, you're a computer engineer, but I don't have any Microsoft certifications. When all of a sudden he went back and he got every single one of them, they're like, you don't have any argument because he's actually more trained than some of your guys are. So that was a huge help to us. Now, where that SolarWinds did pay dividends is, you know, when we did have those problems in emergencies and things like that, some of the things we were able to go right out, look at the network, but I also had somebody who was allowed to go into the network because it's one of these things of boundaries. I know a lot about computers. Do I want to go inside the network? No, I want nothing to do with that. I know where my fence is. I want to stay on my side of the fence because I can do more, you know, I can watch something, but I can do more damage than I can good. So find out the network and the ownership. And one of the things I was talking about priorly in my other class was that new network we have coming online with a, I shouldn't say accidentally, but we acquired a new practice that was owned by another, that was basically being run by another company. So we had 2 computer networks now, so I don't even want to think what the cyber threats could be on that. So Microsoft, now here's one of the things that is coming up here that how many of you guys knew that Windows 10 is going out of support eminently?
Didn't know, but it's not uncommon.
It's not.
Definitely expected.
No, it was. How many people are still running devices with XP? I just got an alert from my cyber group that said, you've got 7 workstations, GE Gamma Camera workstations that are on XP. What do you plan to do about it? I said, pretty much. It is, and from what I heard years ago, and I don't know how we're getting, because when I worked for McLaren Health, I was told that anything that was running XP, if you submitted it for reimbursement, you didn't get paid for it. And so that's kind of like, as I loop back around again, I'm not in the revenue of billing and stuff like that, but I'm trying to figure out how 10 years ago, that bar had been set, and now you've still got all these devices out there, and you just can't buy. We're like everybody else. We are doing decent. We're doing better on that side, but we don't have enough money to replace all the stuff we have, especially my new 3 hospitals, because that's no. I think that's a weakness in healthcare, I'll be honest with you. So identify device vulnerabilities, network-related risks, operating systems. One of the weaknesses, and I'll be point blank, that's a duplicate slide. Yep, sorry about that. Anyways, one of the weaknesses in our database and is, all of you guys have a CMMS system, right? We moved to one called Nuvolo. So I don't know if you guys have ever moved to that one or not. Pardon? You do? How's it working for you? Pretty well. We got to talk because mine works like a three-legged dog hunting. Yeah, that's a bad analogy, but you know, it's that's what we're working on right now. Because one of the problems we had with ours was the implementation. I'm 5 years into it because actually when I was in my prior life, that was what I was doing, was writing the RFP for a new database, and then I jumped fences. Actually, I was supposed to go somewhere else, and the day that I was getting ready to be announced as a director at a different hospital, my boss called and they interviewed me on the phone. And before I even drove like 80 miles, they were offering me a job. And so, you know, it's kind of one of those weird things. I was not staying at WellStar. And then by the time I was almost home, guess when I'm staying at WellStar. So, but, you know, so like we're saying, the segregated networks, you know, one of the things that our IT division does do a good job with is segregating everything. One of the big weaknesses, and this came up when I first took over this job, we did an AGFA PACS upgrade. In our old database, does anybody ever remember a device called Metamizer or a software program? Yeah, the history of that goes back to the 1990s, a guy named Herb Gardner. So this is like the first, you know, great program, but unfortunately none of the data that went into that, you know, we didn't have any of the data, because when I took over my job, it was basically, the weakness of my job was 15 years before I took the job, they did not have anybody who had any technical expertise running the department. It was all run by radiology technicians. So the data they were concerned about was to get a PM schedule in, to get a serial number in, to get a device number in. And if you're lucky, you got the PO and the amount. The rest of it, we don't really care. We're not worried about it. They didn't even understand the concept of everything you touch should have a work order on it so you can document your time for productivity. So I had to train my group, you know, about that stuff. So anyways, you know, IT, the problem we had with the AGFA though was they called us in and they said, okay, I need to dispatch your guys out to these IP addresses. And that was, the fortunate part was when I was part of IT, I worked on the 9th floor of our IT building. Right behind me, they hired a new manager of basically connectivity, Ron Gilbert. And so Ron and I were probably 20 feet from each other and both being kind of newbies, you know, we happened to run into each other chatting all the time and things like that. So when I transitioned to my new job, all the guys in IT had already, because I biomed fed up to IT, they already knew me because I was already on, they stuffed me on the administrative floor basically, where all the managers of IT were. So I got to go to the C-suite area, and that was one of my things of getting the good pens I learned in life. The VPs always have better pens than you do, and the CEOs. So every time I show up for a meeting, they even made that joke. I never had a pen. I was like, can I borrow one? Yours are made in West Germany, mine are made by Papermate. So I don't recommend you do this, mind you. You have to have that ability to get away with it. So anyways, one of the problems we had with the Paxton is actually one of the things my boss did was we had all of our group there waiting to be dispatched, but we didn't know where to go because we still have that issue between us. We go serial number, location, we know where everything's at, but we don't know what port you're on. We know we've got most of our AE titles, but the AE titles, we don't have access to the network back and forth where we could reach out and say, this device is over here. We have to reach out to the connectivity group who's run by my friend Ron and say, hey, where is this thing? You know, we can do whatever we need to do to it, but we just don't know where it's at. So I don't know if any of you guys have that same issue, or is it just me? I'm special. Pardon? No, because that's good knowledge, because that's something that's been our weakness. And actually, when we're talking about Nuvolo, is Nuvolo rides on, as you know, ServiceNow. Have any of you guys heard of ServiceNow? So what happens is we've got a problem right now because the way ours is set up, our IT people can't get into our tickets, and we're kind of isolated by a fence. So when they're creating vulnerability tickets for us, I can actually get into them now, but they're trying to get into our side of the fence in the way that, and this is something I said go back to Nuvolo, because like I said, that hearing that I have never had too many people say they're having great experiences with Nuvolo. Yeah, and we are too. That's what Nuvolo. I'm actually an expert in names, and I said this right before I left. I said if Nuvolo keeps developing like it does over the next 10 years, it will be functional as my AIMS database was 15 years ago. Because I could email, I could do anything within a matter of keystrokes with that, and I don't know why, what the deal is with Nuvolo, but simple things like reports, productivity reports, equipment queries, everything you can, and I'm not bashing it, it's just the way the program is. But I love Phoenix Data System, but with Nuvolo, if I know exactly what I'm looking for, I'll find it. But if I'm just trying to do a general query and rummaging for it, it's like rummaging through a dumpster. Eventually, if you're savvy enough with your equipment, you'll find what you're looking for. But it's just a matter of how, with me, it doesn't take long. But if you give it to my boss, she's looked into it and she said, I'm not even going to touch this thing. And that's the problem we have with IT right now, is we're trying to have both of us work together. And that was why we bought Nuvolo, was supposedly everything works together, and we'll just see where it goes. But also Nuvolo was bought by Train. I don't know if you knew that. Yes, Train. And if you look at how Nuvolo's set up, they have, I always said, is the perfect software if I want to call in a missile strike on one of my sites. I've got latitude, I've got longitude, I've got elevation. So if I want, if I'm calling in saying send a bomb over to LaGrange, Georgia, got the floor number and everything, but the stuff like the demographics that really most people need. I remember I got in a big fight with them over simple. They said every device is fixed in a location. I said, welcome to the world of infusion pumps. So anyways, real world issues, passwords, HIPAA information protection, user access, unattended devices. That was part of my life. How many people still walk around seeing their wows, as we call them today, left with open screens? It's pretty common. Encryption, software management. One of the issues we're having just recently, because we're complaining about our Nuvolo, was we're not allowed to download any software applications. So when I was complaining about doing some network stuff, figuring out why we're so slow, the first thing they said was, go ahead and download Firefox. And I said, wait a minute, we were told specifically we're not allowed to, put any browser on any device that is not sanctioned by WellStar. And it also explained to me a cybersecurity issue that I have with one of my devices. And it's not a cybersecurity, it's a recommendation that's been standing, and I've had this tit for tat between the vendor and WellStar, and guess what the program is? Firefox. And GE said, we don't use Firefox. Our IT division said, we don't install Firefox in anything. And it's like, well, I got an email right before I left that said, use Firefox to try using your ServiceNow application. It's like, I thought you guys told us we couldn't do that. So it's even mixed messages from your own people. Ensure, so some of the things I'm not going to address, and you already probably know a lot about this. When things come in, when devices come in, they've got their 510, certifications from the FDA. Our cyber, one thing I don't cross over is any of my contracts that come in. If they go to IT, I let IT do their own thing. I don't get into any of their world. I make sure that whatever you guys need to address, you do it, and I don't tell you how to do your job. But also conversely, some of the issues you have about some of these roles, I know just recently we're going back and forth with a new vendor, which with a lot of you guys was familiar, but what happened was they were going back and forth on red lines and delayed a contract actually 4 months past the expiration date. And the company that I was dealing with said, you know what, we don't start retro contracts. We'll only retro at 30 days. So unbeknownst to even my CEO, she left a window of 4 months open on me. And guess what happened in that time of 4 months? A $50,000 repair came up that normally would have been covered. And what delayed it? It was, I was watching the chain because I submit all the contracts. I was watching the banner back and forth from our IT group to the vendor back and forth redlining. And it was like watching, you ever, that old slow boat thing going down the river. And I'm going, come on, guys, you got to get faster on this. And lo and behold, the only fortunate part was I negotiated with the company and said, look, our relationship just started, and is this how you want our first relationship to be? And they basically cut me down to just the parts. So I saved 25 grand, but if they'd have got on, letting them do their thing. And now what I do is any new device that comes in, I immediately submit their contract in to make sure it's in our contracting system. So anybody can go through any of the IT stuff they need to worry about and because right off the bat, it wasn't a cyber issue, but it was literally a major vulnerability. Document, we were talking about that, going back on this Windows again. Third party off, one of the things that's coming up, I don't know if you guys are seeing the alerts at all coming through, is it's not only our devices, because you'll have the alert, we have right now alerts coming through from Metagate, from our cyber people. We have the standard stuff coming through the vendors. We have stuff coming through ECRI, so it's coming through multiple portals. And actually one of the worst things that we have right now, and I can't get it corrected, it's actually, we're basically a big Philips house. And despite telling Philips who we are, they keep sending every device recall to all of our legacy hospitals. And sometimes they get, we'll have them delayed anywhere from a week to months because it goes in their, it goes in their standard mail. And how many people check their mail anymore? I'll be honest, I check my mailbox in my office once every 2 weeks because the only magazines I get are MD Publishing. Now, what I used to get was hundreds of invoices from Philips, things like that, but everything is now digital. So when these things come back, then all of a sudden we'll see all these 911s come through where somebody scans me something, and we've already addressed it months and months before, but in that site, it becomes a 911. So, some of the other, what a weakness we just had recently was I'm trying to remember the name of the product. It was not an Obix, but basically our GE ultrasounds used it, and I never saw it. We came through with a alert, and immediately when my boss saw it, she knew immediately what it was. But it's something that we didn't document because it's basically an application that's used by the device to communicate and send its data. And so we're working on making sure that when we start getting a more robust database, we're not only logging down what the operating system is, what the vendor's operating system is, what else is on that machine that we may not know about. And you guys all know, everyone knows about patching and stuff, right? No? Yes? Because one of the problems we have with and this was a big thing at, WellStar has been very good about it, but my old place, Erlanger, they would occasionally administer antivirus patches and not catch our exclusion list. And so on many occasions, I remember one night we were just, one of my vendors came through and gave me a call and said, hey, just to let you know, I saw an alert on the screen down in the GI lab that you guys are going to administer a patch at 9 o'clock tonight. And if you do that patch, antivirus patch, you're going to take out your whole lab. See you later, I got to go by. And the only fortunate thing was there were two of us were working late on a Friday night at 7:30 at night, and we ran down to our GI lab and unplugged everything and called our IT division and said, you guys cannot do this. So as we're talking recall, make sure the level of criticality of the recall, who issued it, FDA, vendor, ECRI, what documentation did you get? We just actually chased the ghost for about 4 hours, me and my dispatcher, because we had something come through from Philips that was basically a warning. It was a cyber warning of a vulnerability. And when they come back from IT, and this one came out of our Medigate system, we said, okay, anything that comes out, we consider a #1 priority. We're going to at least get a work order, open it. We're going to get it addressed. We're watching it. Lo and behold, it was remedied when we started looking at our database. It came back from 2021, 2022. The devices they were concerned about were built in 2023. So it wasn't even a concern because the device did not even have that potential vulnerability. Who has your operating system backups? In the event of end of life, determine plan B. Are there any one of the issues we had just recently, and being transparent about this, I don't put it on video or anything, but we had an MRI, an older GE, that unbeknownst to us was under our Philips contract. They had left all the software backups out, sitting in their area. And what happened was one of the managers, being due diligence, said, go into the MRI area, back in the equipment room, take everything that's out and throw it away. And so what happened was, guess what was sitting out? All the software for this MRI. So now, granted, it was an end of life, out of support, but we had every single backup, but it was actually in charge of Philips. So it wasn't our device to manage, but literally that just tells you about something so simple. And shortly thereafterwards, probably it was, I want to say about 45 days after this incident happened where they got rid of the stuff, we had a serious issue with the MRI, and they said, no problem, we'll go out there, take care of it. Went out there and said, who's got the discs? It's like, what discs? That's why we pay you millions of dollars. We don't control them. Now at Erlanger, I had everything that was software licensed, discs, we had locked up in our library under lock and key. So we knew if we needed to have that, if it wasn't virtual and it was physical, we had it and we controlled it. In that case, the MRI ended up, it just expedited its death, would be the best term for it. So, it would have lived probably 6 more months-ish, but instead it just kind of slid off into its afterlife. It's going to be replaced, but that just tells you when people don't know what they're, when they go in an area and they don't know what they're looking for, accidents happen. Was it malicious? No. Did you go back on the person who cleaned the room and say, smack their hand? No. It's a lesson learned to the manager. Say, be careful before you send people in places they shouldn't be. IT and vendors both need to apply patches, eventually antivirus patches. I've had a lot of arguments through my career. I remember when I was doing stuff at Erlanger, we had a whole discussion about, it was Cisco versus Nortel. And we were I want to make sure I get this right. We are a Cisco show site nationally, but all my systems and my patient monitoring ran Nortel. So they came through, and when we went to do our install, our IT division came to me and said, no, we're not using that. I said, yes, you are. You're using it as actually exactly a spec, because if you start modifying the system in any form, what happens under the new guy? There's still a gray zone about networking, but if you start modifying a medical device, who becomes a manufacturer? The person who owns it, because you deviated from what it was originally designed and meant to perform as. And years ago, any of you ever rebuild power supplies or stuff like that? Come on, guys. Any of you know how to use a soldering iron? Okay, good, thank God. Years ago, go back to my age, Marquette monitors, we had power supplies that would blow up. We learned that we could rebuild the power supplies with better components, take them parts that weren't used, and we were making more reliable devices that we'd lose an average of a power supply every 6 months. We went to not losing one for years. Going forward today, I would have my hand slapped so hard for doing that. Even though our engineering and behind it, I mean, we did all the stuff, weaponizing the circuits, everything's showing the ripple and everything, how great we did. And today, no, I wouldn't do that for anything. I would love to, but
Paperwork and documentation that you will not make it.
yeah.
And it's
Termination, yeah. All right, and we just had, it wasn't as much of a cyber issue, but you know, to that stands, and I won't pick on the vendor downstairs, but we just had a bunch of devices coming in, and they were basically dying within 60 days, point of care devices. Not by their fault, but I reached out to them and said, we're having all sorts of problems with connectivity. These things are dropping work lists from our PAC system. They're dying randomly. And I said, we're getting to the point where it's costing me a lot of manpower because I'm based out of Marietta and I'm going out to all these sites. And every time I dispatch somebody out, I'm losing probably an hour and a half of windshield time in Metro Atlanta. Lo and behold, what they didn't know was one of their vendors couldn't get a group of the chips that they needed to stuff their boards. So what happened was I hit the point of, if you guys can't straighten this out, I'm just going to have to take you off the list of recommended vendor. Because I can't, even though you have a very robust warranty, I'm not paying a dime for this. What I'm losing clinical use, and I've got concerns, across the board. I'm not getting my work list through. We're not transmitting our data, because that was one of the things that did change about these point of care things. Is none of this stuff used to go to PACS for the longest time. All these Sona sites, all these Fuji, everything you can think of, like the little baby ultrasounds, I call them. I used to call them vein finders. I put them in that group of vein finders. I'm that old. They're glorified, yeah. Yeah. And none of those went anywhere. And that was one of the problems we had with that one group that showed up, where nobody realized, I just went back into my old days. I spent a lot of time in surgery, and I was like, yeah, I know what this thing does. I've been in there watching people do spinal blocks, stuff like that. This is just, a device, I call it it's something you have in the room that's a cost of doing business. You need it to get your patient, you're doing a spinal block for a delivery or something like that, or a C-section. We don't really, we maintain them, we make sure everything works, but the data doesn't go anywhere. There's, they're basically, I used to call them dumb devices. As long as you didn't put a patient name in it, we really didn't care about it. For some reason, somebody's crossed over. Okay. Access management. This is something we've been going through with our IT division. And going back to, I'm not picking on Bayer, mind you, but we just did an initiative with Bayer, because I said, what happened was when I took over my job, we were upside down on our injectors. We had injectors that were crossing into 20 years old on our CT side. We didn't have the capital money, but what we did have is we had the ability to sign a service contract that put everybody up to Stalin flexes. So it was a forklifted across all my sites, got everybody up to current technology. Lo and behold, now we have remote access that we're working on hooking these things into. And hence, if we didn't have this one device, actually was not in that group of devices that we had just installed with remote access. This was done during another project, so it's kind of a fluke that this was even on the network. That got enabled. That remember when I was telling you I had the 2 gigabyte bursts? I'm still, I would love to know what happened so I could share it with you guys. But right now what they're saying is it's a Microsoft issue, 100%. So it's nothing to do with Bayer. It's nothing to do with anybody trying to intrude on it. It just, for lack of a better term, it decided to hiccup, and computers are going to keep us in business. Documentation, we're talking about that. Our hope is we're getting our new system in. We're hoping Nuvolo would originally populate all this stuff. We populate as much as we could when we get it. but we've got a lot of legacy devices we're working on. And from my standpoint, I'll be honest with you, I have probably 5 less employees than what I need. So going out and reaching out and getting in all these devices or the vendors, because a lot of these devices are password protected where you can't, to get in the physical device, you can't. You need to get in, like you were saying, if you have something that will let you get in to see the MAC address and document it, we're not quite there yet. I don't know why some of these duped. So what IT tools do you have for monitoring data on the network? In the event of a data concern, how's the notification done? It's a universal system all parties can use for documentation and resolution. This bottom one right here is our biggest challenge. I mean, the best thing that I have right now is everything that comes through our IT division comes through as a VUL work, in ServiceNow, it's called a vulnerability work order. And then what I do is I transfer it into our system as, that same type of thing. But the problem we do have, and we're working through it, and I'm being transparent about it, is we don't see each other. I can, I've got to the point of where I can see somewhat of what they're into. I can put a note in, but you ever put a note, work order in ServiceNow? Have you ever done a work order in ServiceNow? It's a whole different animal in our world than Nuvolo. So you're able to look at each other? I gotta give you my business card. That has been okay. Pardon? Okay. No, that'd be because that was actually one of the, I'll be honest with you, when I first was writing the RFP for Nuvolo, I actually went through the training, went up to Cleveland, went to Nuvolo and said, guys, I need your help because our training didn't go well because the third party that was doing it. I said this went, we didn't, for 3 days, we didn't get anything done. And it came back to my IT group that I was saying that I've said a lot of negative stuff where all I asked for was better training. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to go to a different hospital than WellStar originally when that came back, because they portrayed it as, you got the guy who's doing this, doesn't like us. And I said, no, it's just you spent 3 days with us and we didn't learn anything. Anything about how to set up the system. The person got for 1 day an argument with us about room locations. Because we had healthcare IT. I don't know if you guys had them or not. You ever heard of them? Yeah. It's a third. Nuvolo doesn't have their own tech support. That was their arm of tech support. So what I was used to with AIMS was I just call somebody up. I had premier coverage with AIMS. I call somebody up, they answer the phone, we fix the problem immediately. That's what we just did. We just hired a Nuvolo analyst, or I should say Biomed did. I'm not paying for it. So they are the masters of it. They put all the money out for it. So it's their, so I will get the benefit from it, but we had to hire somebody, specifically what I was used to. We had a high level IT guy who was watching over my database. I was the admin for AIMS, so I could do anything except for change table structure. That was his job, or undo software updates. Nuvolo now has that. If you don't do the software update within 3 revisions, they drop your support. Did you ever hear that one? You haven't heard of it? Oh, no, they have I call it the tour of the world. They have different countries they go to alphabetically. And I said, I'll be happy because last time I was into it, they're going on. There's Pakistan, all these different companies, Norway, stuff like that. And I said, as soon as you get to Marietta, Georgia, then it'll probably be working great, because then you've gone through all the cities in the US, and then, you've gotten to that granular level. And I'm not trying to bash them, I'm just being realistic. So So one of the things we were able to do with one of our vendors, Philips, we just started, and I couldn't, as we're, anybody heard of ServiceNow at all? We have a dispatch system of work orders. And what we just started doing, we're the second company in the US that's using this. So we're leveraged our ServiceNow ticketing system where we can now give all of our users, this is just probably within the last 30 days, it's actually fully working. They have full access to watch all their devices. They can watch their up times, all that stuff. And so it's been a great, I was hoping to get some slides on that one, but I'm assuming we've had a lot of work with the Netherlands. We've been working that for 2 years. If anyone doesn't know, Philips is no longer out of Massachusetts. They are now a European company. So, that's why. Just like GE, how many people think they're in Wisconsin? They're basically Denmark. Siemens, they're actually by my daughter's house in Bavaria, Germany. So anyways, so this tool, we've got remote access to diagnose our systems. We're able to access a lot more of our software. And actually, to be honest with you, I've been leveraging more than our Philips system when I need to fix my Nuvolo system, because that's been my backup, because we do have that multi-vendor agreement.